Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
Well, hey, Jesse, it's so good to be talking about momentum. We're continuing our series on momentum. And before we get started, I want to ask our listeners if this podcast has been helpful for you and it's helping you to think of different things in ministry and as a valuable resource. Will you do us a favor and will you share this episode with a friend? Leave us a review on your platform of choice. It helps us continue to reach more people, to help more pastors, and that's what we're really passionate about. So thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening and for making this part of your routine. So we're excited to jump into this next chapter on momentum, but quickly before we do, I do want to tell you about an opportunity coming up because it's almost here. I want to make sure you have enough time to sign up for it. It's all about how to develop your discipleship strategy as a church. We talked a couple episodes ago about this, about a discipleship strategy. And so what we're doing is, let's see, when this airs, it'll be next week on September 24th. We're starting a 6-week Zoom cohort where you will learn exactly how to create or refine your church's discipleship strategy. So how someone moves from guest to engaged follower of Jesus. And as a bonus, we're going to talk about how to leverage Christmas as a catalyst for that. So most churches, as you know, they sort of cross their fingers and hope spiritual formation happens. But the truth is, it's really easy for our folks to get lost and confused if the steps aren't clear. I know many end up slipping out the back door of the church. We definitely have had that problem before. And it's because they don't know what to do next. So let's create some clarity around our steps. By the end of 6 weeks, you're going to have a framework for your discipleship strategy and a plan for exactly how you're going to leverage Christmas. So this is what I've done in my church. I know Jesse has done it in his church. And again, we get started September 24th. That's next week. We're going to go for 6 weeks with 3 teaching modules and 3 workshop modules. So it's going to be, we're going to work this thing out together in real time to help you come up with your plan. So I hope you'll sign up and be a part of it. It's reclaimleader.com/disciple. reclaimleader.com/disciple for more information and to sign up. And I hope to see you there.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
Nothing on you, but I think it's an awesome thing that you're going to be doing for us to think in terms of helping form followers of Jesus and what's our strategy. And if we don't have something in place, or maybe it's not what we would want it to be, come talk shop with Jason. Hear a little bit more about some things that are working in our churches. And even if you have one takeaway that you can apply, I mean, those are just worthwhile kinds of conversations.
Yeah, and I feel like I learned so much. We all learned so much from each other because we've all approached this a little differently. We have different ideas, so it's awesome. I hope folks will sign up for that. So talking about momentum, I love, Jesse, this story of momentum because it's going to lead into what we're talking about today. Go ahead and share a little bit about your hometown team.
Yeah. So this, we're talking about momentum and just how it kind of begins to have a life of its own. And it's something exciting to be a part of it. I was thinking back to my sophomore year in high school, Jason, way back 100 years ago or whenever it was. It's a long time ago, 1995. And Seattle Mariners in Seattle, a team that was potentially on the way out of the city. They were going to leave. They're going to be bought out and go live in another town. And that year, in the middle of the year, by the time we got to August, the Seattle Mariners were 13 games out of first place behind the California Angels. Ken Griffey Jr., our big star, had broken his arm and was out. And it seemed like there's just no way. Let's just write the season off and be done. But Lou Piniella, the Seattle Mariners manager, he was not going to give up. And something began to happen. The Mariners won a game. Then they won another game. People started to pay attention. California, the Angels started to lose, and the gap began to shrink. And what happened in our region was amazing. What started with a few thousand people going to Seattle Mariners games in the Old Kingdom. You might remember that building.
Yeah,
Old
oh my gosh, yes.
Just a sparse crowd. All of a sudden began to fill in. And a few thousand turned into 5,000, then 10,000. And then the buzz started to happen as excitement built. The Mariners were winning without Griffey. His return's coming soon. Is it possible? Could they do it? And that's when the whole region came up with this slogan called "Refuse to Lose." And the banners started to show up in the stadium. People were coming, excited, cheering the team on. And Seattle fans, we're football fans first, mostly Husky fans and Seahawks fans. And so the baseball game sounded more like a football game than a baseball game. The crowd was shouting, yelling, cheering, booing the other team. And we created this environment. The excitement built. And pretty soon the kingdom was full, 50,000 plus people at a Mariners baseball game. The team closed the gap in the final couple days of the season in a one-game playoff, beat the California Angels to make the Major League Baseball playoffs for the very first time in their history. And the whole region went wild. There was so much momentum, so much excitement, so many people becoming fans of a team that they had kind of largely ignored before. The whole city, the region adopted the Seattle Mariners as a collective and began to think, you know what, this is something we should hang on to and be a part of. So the Seattle Mariners went into the playoffs. And if you know the story of the 95 Mariners, you know that Griffey was back, Edgar Martinez, some of the stars we had in those days. They beat the New York Yankees in a 5-game series. Having trailed 2-0, they won 3 straight games, and they won in the 5th game on a double down the line by Edgar Martinez. Griffey scored from first, and the whole city went berserk. The Kingdom was cheering for 20, 30 minutes. The people stayed and cheered. And it was this momentum that had created a genuine excitement that led to extraordinary outcomes that nobody back in August would have ever thought was possible. But there it was. And kind of one of the pinnacle moments of my childhood. I remember the Seattle Mariners announcers, Rick Riz and Dave Niehaus. I can hear their voices. Griffey's rounding third. He's going to score. The Mariners are heading to the American League Championship Series. It's amazing. So those iconic things.
I love that story.
That momentum that built excitement that caused people to lean in and want to be a part of it. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. How does excitement build the kind of momentum that leads to invitation and a desire to belong and to be connected?
Yeah, because listen, momentum is a product of excitement. And the truth is, excited people invite others to come along for the ride.
They sure do, yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that's very much undersold or undervalued when it comes to church health or outreach or evangelism, if we dare use the E word anymore, is excited people invite other people. It's like if you go to a restaurant. We got a place down here that we love to go to. It's open in the summertime. It's right on the marina. They have a lobster special. Here's this. Lobster special. You get 2 pound-and-a-half lobsters and corn, potatoes, and they do it on Tuesday nights. And it's super cheap. Well, cheapish. And we love it. We love the vibe. Our family, we go there a couple times this summer. And I feel like I'm evangelizing for this restaurant every time I see a friend. I'm just like, oh man, have you been down to Boondocks yet? You got to go.
It's so good.
Oh, you're new to the area? You got to go check it out, right?
Yeah.
And you don't think about what strategy am I going to use to invite them. It just happens organically because you're excited. This is exactly the same thing that happens at church.
Yep.
When people are excited about church, they invite other people, and it's just natural. It's just a natural instinct for them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons that churches aren't good at inviting, I think one of the factors is that largely people, especially Christians who've been in your building a long time, aren't excited enough to really invite the people around them. Now, I don't think that's necessarily an indictment of our churches. I just think they become so accustomed to doing church every single week in and out and faithfully, and that's awesome. But the excitement factor isn't really a factor anymore.
Right.
And so, and then it's funny because then you'll do like a big concert or something, and they'll invite people, but not on a week to week basis.
Yeah, not in a sustained way, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So excitement, momentum is how are people excited into action?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it's when you are meeting people's needs. We talked about this last week as we set up the idea of momentum. When you're meeting people's needs, there is something deeply exciting
Yeah.
that those people experience. Not, well, say those people. I experience it too.
Yeah.
When I feel like I go to a conference and I am seen, people understand what I'm going through. It's like we talk about that North Point conference all the time.
Yeah.
Right? When we went to the Drive conference,
Yeah.
and they were applauding for us, and we're all like moved to tears. I mean, it was so powerful. For those who didn't hear us talk about it before, just real quick, it was on our way out. Well, did it both on the
On our way in. Very
way in
first
and the way
thing that
out.
happened. Yeah.
So North Point Community Church, Andy Stanley's church, they do a conference every other year where they sort of share what they've learned with pastors, and they're there to encourage and equip. Anyway, when you walk into the church, when we walked into the start of the conference, they had a huge line of volunteers. What do you say, 100 volunteers maybe?
At least, yeah. Probably more, yeah.
And as each one of us walked through, they had like a gauntlet, like you're going onto a field,
Mm-hmm.
and they were just applauding and cheering for us.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, man, that was so moving. It's because they knew that our felt need was to be appreciated,
Yeah.
to be seen for the work that we're doing. And we're not all Andy Stanley on big platforms getting recognized.
Yeah.
And they did such a good job of that. It made me excited. So excited that I'm still talking about it how many years later.
It was
And
so
it's
validating,
powerful.
right? It was validating and empowering and life-giving, because it hit right to a core need for us as pastors to think that the work we're doing matters, and somebody knows that and is rooting for us. And so, yeah, that excitement that kind of builds when we're meeting those needs, and then the word starts getting out. It's kind of like creating a win streak. I don't know. A lot of our churches, maybe your church, you feel stuck, or you feel like, man, I don't know what the future, how are we going to get to momentum? Well, I mean, like the Seattle Mariners, we're 13 games out. It was impossible. There's no way. It was 0.001% chance of making the playoffs, or whatever the things are. And it was one win, one right step at a time. No guarantees, but building some momentum that turned towards excitement. And that's kind of what I think we're getting to, is how do we create some sustained excitement by meeting needs and kind of creating a win streak, so to speak, that people can begin to get excited about as they see the progress.
Yeah. And really the goal is that excitement would lead to developing a culture in your church of invitation.
Yeah.
How do you go from a church that doesn't do much inviting to a church that inviting is just part of their DNA? So part of that's generating excitement, and another part is training your congregation what to do with that excitement.
Yeah.
So the first part, let's talk a bit about the excitement again. It's when you're meeting needs well, when people feel like you see them, you understand them, they respond. And I know this. I feel there's always in the back of my head, Jesse, I've got like Reformed theologian guy in the back of my head, I think from seminary. And it's oftentimes he's a good reminder, but there's that piece that I'm always thinking, worship is for the Lord and for him alone. Yeah. And I agree with that. So we're not doing it for the sake of people being seen, but at the same time, people feeling seen is part of their experience of God, because how we love God and love one another are just completely intertwined and meshed, and you can't really separate the two. So the way in which we love each other enough to care what your pain points are is all part of our corporate experience of then worshiping God together.
Yeah. Is there anything more exciting than knowing that the grace and love of God given in Christ meets our real needs in our real world as it actually is?
Yeah.
That's what we need, is what we are made for. So I do think, that part of us that wants to just, maybe not drill down as far on the application or the engagement part, we go, no, this is what the gospel's for, to be understood and then applied in the context of our real life. And that is a need that we have, that people can rally around and get excited about. And I wonder what Jason is going to say today that might move me or challenge me or help me in some way. Because the Christian faith is not just empty platitudes. It's what Christ is who I need more than anyone. So I think that, it's a valid point. How are we doing it? presenting that in a way that's compelling and clear and good.
So how do we help people feel like they're seen, right? If generating excitement is about feeling like you're really meeting needs, you're connecting with who they are, where they are, and then bringing the gospel to bear in that connection. Well, I think it's a couple of things. So let's break it down. What are the needs? How do we meet, or what do we have to meet the need? And then, how do we do that? So our need is, I'll just speak for our church. We want people to have a relationship with Jesus, or to grow in their relationship with Jesus.
Right.
We have a weekly worship experience that will point to Jesus. We think that's probably the most likely landing place for people. So how do we invite people into that experience? Mm-hmm. We do it by acknowledging and anticipating barriers and offering a connection.
Yeah.
So I'm going to think about, out of love for the person I'm trying to reach, I'm thinking, what's going to be a barrier to them coming to Jesus unnecessarily? How do we make sure that doesn't happen? Make sure that they're cared for and mm-hmm. seen, and they just logistically know where the bathroom is, know where to take their kids to Sunday school, all those things. Like, have we thought of them as our guests? Mm-hmm. And I think it's two things. It's more than two things, but two things I want to talk about today. I think it's both language, the words we use matter, mm-hmm. and it's posture.
Yeah.
So let's start with language. There are right ways and wrong ways to invite. So if I'm going to someone on the soccer field and I'm inviting them to church, I'm probably not going to say, join us Sunday to surrender your soul to the triune, almighty, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Jesus Christ. Yeah. Everything I said was true, yeah. and exactly what I hope people will do. But I'm probably going to say something more like, come and see Jesus, what Jesus is all about. Come, mm-hmm. Hey, I know you've given up on church. You should give ours a try. It's a little different than what you've experienced before. Right? Language matters. Language matters. And that's why we spend a lot of time in our church really thinking about, how do we talk about church? Mm-hmm. How do we invite people to church? How do we do it in a way without using, you mentioned baseball, inside baseball language,
exactly.
Jargon, Christian jargon that not everybody completely understands. How do we do that well? Language is something, you guys think about language when you're inviting?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we talk about with our people, if you're finding this meaningful, say that to someone. I've really enjoyed it. I think you probably enjoy it too. You should come check it out. I'll take, if you want to go, we can go together. Things like that, where you're making it about come and see and experience too. I love that. If you go to the beginning of the Gospel of John and how Andrew goes and finds Simon, it says, come and see, follow, let's go. Philip does it for Nathaniel. And there's this invitation just not to convince and convert in that moment, but to bring someone towards Jesus, to come and see. And I think that kind of messaging or language is good. It's like your restaurant analogy. You should check it out. It's really good. I think you'd love it. Yeah. You go back to the Seattle Mariners, the language they used in the Refuse to Lose season, it was, sort of this, thank you fans. You guys are making all the difference. And if you haven't been down to the Kingdom yet, you should come too. It's so exciting. This is what's going on down here with the Seattle Mariners. So it's a come and see and be a part of the excitement with us, rather than, you're our project and we want you to come so we can fix you, or, whatever other guilt factors we might kind of pile onto somebody. There's a genuineness. If we're enjoying it and excited by it, that's going to be evident in the language you use with invitation.
Exactly. And the examples I always use are my two examples when I was evangelized as a kid, yeah. As a young person, right? The first, 8th grade, David Pardo, God bless you, wherever you are, David. We were buddies. He gave me a gospel tract about how rock and roll music, and at the end of it, the devil was waiting to ensnare me. It was terrifying, and I never talked to him again. I was so freaked out by it. I'd never seen anything like that. I'd never gone to church. It definitely pushed me way far away from anything close, because it was trying to sort of convert me on the spot, and that's not where I was. I didn't even know enough to care about being converted. Mm-hmm. But my second experience was at church. My mother worked in the preschool. We didn't attend, but Agnes Sales, who I thought was already 100 years old, I think she only recently died 10 years ago. So she must have been probably like 60. And I thought she was, ancient. She invited me to, she saw I was just kind of doing nothing. And she said, will you help me be the VBS volunteer and help me make the snacks for the kids?
Yeah.
Because she knew I wasn't going to do VBS. I wasn't going to, but she knew she had to get me involved. And I wasn't going to say no to her because, here's this nice old lady and she needs my help. I was okay, cool. And that did more for me than anything. But you see what that invite was? It was taking into account who I was, where I was, what was going on, and trying to give me a right-sized invite into an experience.
Yeah,
and
a discerning invitation.
Yeah.
What's the right way? What's the right approach? And I know we're going to get to posture in a minute, but this language really matters. And are we taking into account who it is we're talking to, what's going on in their lives? Should we be thinking in terms of our youth environments or our kids' environments or our grief support group or whatever the things are? And I would say this, I would just add this layer in there, is if you're going to encourage a culture of invitation, it's so good when it comes out of a genuine excitement of things that are actually going on that are good and worth inviting people to. And if you're going to encourage your people to invite and you're not ready to meet those that they invite with something that's going to be meaningful for them, you're going to find that your people not only won't invite anymore, but they'll be really scared to invite ever again. And so I think that's the momentum part. We need to think in terms of meeting needs, creating some things that are meaningful in our life together, that are meeting needs for our folks and potentially for our community, that are worth someone getting excited enough about to invite their friend or neighbor to. I mean, it's risky to invite someone. Yeah. So let's meet that.
Yeah. And so the language we use matters for how we talk to people about church, about, inviting them to church. And I think the glue between language and posture, which we're going to talk about posture in a second. And then I have a list of sort of how do you develop a culture of invitation. But the glue between language and posture is relationship. Mm-hmm. Because if you're thinking about just being a good friend to the people you're trying to reach, you'll treat them as such. If you treat them as sort of an object of your spiritual agenda, they sniff that out, and it's not going to go well. And it's not actually a very loving way of doing it, even though you mean well. Yeah. You want to bring people to Jesus, but the glue, and you see this, and this is all over Jesus' ministry, is relationship. Mm-hmm. So we talk about the stages of faith, from I once was lost, trusting a Christian. How do you build trust?
You be trustworthy. Yeah. You show up for people and be in their life without an agenda. Treat them as a friend and someone that you care about, and that genuineness will lead to something. So be trustworthy, I think, by not trying to do something to someone. Just be there with them and for them.
Yeah. And then your posture, and I would say this is your posture as a church, is about developing an outward facing stance, an outward facing posture. In other words, reaching people where they are, not where church people think they should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what does it take for me to put myself in their shoes and try to explain to them why they really ought to put my shoes on for size? Like they really ought to see what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And we're only telling them out of love for them. Yeah. And I say this a lot. In fact, I said it on Sunday. I tell folks, because we've had a lot of new people and I don't know where they are spiritually. And so I say on a pretty regular basis, it's okay to start right where you are.
Yeah.
It's okay to be right where you are, but I don't think God wants you to stay there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just giving people permission. Whatever the expectation they think we have of them, I promise that's not it.
Yeah, and it's good to surprise people that way, to say, hey, you have permission to be right where you are in your life and faith, and we hope that you'll grow and discover more, and we think you're going to find some amazing things, but it's okay to be where you are, and we're glad that you're here. And so there's sort of a permissionness around that invitation and meeting that on the other side. When they do have the courage to show up, they go, oh, good, I can be here.
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's okay if I don't know what's going on yet. Mm-hmm. It's okay if I don't know all the things, and you know what? They're going to take care of me and tell me what the things are. right? It's a feeling of safety. It's a feeling of welcome. It's every bit as spiritual as the other things that we talk about when we're talking about Jesus. So, all right. So how do you develop a culture of invitation? So again, infused in this is if your people are excited about what the Lord's doing in their life, they're going to be excited to invite everybody else. So it really is about spiritual formation. It's about how are we helping people take a step toward Jesus? And then in the midst of all of that, you're helping them say, okay, how do we make sure that part of our DNA as a congregation is reaching out to where people are, inviting them, finding ways to invite people into the life of faith, into our community. So here's a couple ideas that I jotted down, and we can sort of riff on each one a little bit. But the first one is, I think you have to ground this for your folks in the Missio Dei, in the mission of God. You have to explain to them that God is the God who invites and asks us to do the same. As we participate in our life with God, our job is to invite. That's what disciples do. We invite people into a relationship. Come and see.
Yeah, totally.
You know, I met Jesus. I think he's the one.
Yeah. Come and see.
Find out for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I do that. You do that through preaching. I think that's the number one thing that you can do on a Sunday morning, but it's more than that. It's just talking about it a lot on every level of the church. How do you talk with your leadership? How do you talk with volunteers? You're always talking about, we do this. We have an outward facing posture.
Yeah. Because
we believe that's part of our DNA of being followers of Jesus.
Yeah. I found a really helpful phrase. I don't know who we borrowed it from, but it was, in your planning for the things that you're doing in the life of your church, are you thinking in terms of the people who aren't there? And there's this great phrase, who's representing the voice of those who aren't here yet? So sometimes in our planning, we only see what's right in front of us, and we plan for each other and want to look out for each other and do fun things together. And we forget that there are people that aren't there in the room that we're not considering. So who's speaking on their behalf and making sure that we have an outward orientation towards the mission of God in our community, and not just the fun things that we get to do together as a church family. It can be both of those things at once.
Yeah. And then the next thing is, have events that are easy to invite people to. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, find some things. It doesn't all have to be like this, because it depends on what's going on in someone's life. Somebody may really need a deep, like hard-hitting Good Friday service.
Sure.
That might be exactly what they need. So it's not that, but try to find things that are low risk, high fun. Sometimes people just want to know that it's not going to be too churchy.
Yep.
But find things that are easy to invite people to. This fall, I'm going to be teaching Alpha. I haven't taught it in a long time, and I'm excited. And we have found a location for it. I think if it works out, we're going to be at a local tavern. They have an upstairs available, and I want it to be a non-churchy atmosphere. I want it to be as easy a barrier to cross. It is a very popular tavern. People will go there anyway.
Yep.
And to feel like we're just having a conversation about God. I want a low risk and low intimidation factor, and something that feels kind of fun.
Yeah.
That's an easy invite. I think that's a lot easier to come to the pastor's house, you know?
Yeah. Right. I'm never doing that. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So
how do you guys think about events in the course of the year where you're like, you know, let's pick some things that are easy to invite people to?
Yeah, I think you think in terms of fun, relational, and one time we jotted down the phrase "youth group for adults." You know, are you doing things that people who are not just young people love coming to because it's fun, and it maybe has a God moment of that, or something that draws our attention to our faith, but it's not usually the leading part of that. I mean, I've talked about our Jazz Live stuff that we do monthly here, just a concert for our community that we think is fun and good, and we all enjoy being together. And, you know, our community comes, people will never be in church, but then we go, you know what, we're going to pray for you and our community at the start of this. That's really the only church thing that happens. And then we'll kind of build relationships with you and remember your names and get to know you and that kind of thing. And so we kind of think in those terms of some things that are fun just because they're fun and they're good. And so, we've talked about the Christmas, we call it Christmas campfire and carols, and we build a big campfire in our amphitheater and sing Christmas carols and light our Christmas star. And those are just things, invite the community into that, like you guys do with your Tower Hill Christmas. And that can be easy invitation points where people go, okay, this is not getting right into the middle of church, but is a step in. Before the pandemic, we used to call these things contagious community events. And then when the pandemic happened, we were like, well, we can't be a contagious community anymore. That's probably not good. So we had to take the word contagious out. Right? We're like, okay. But that's the idea, is like something that has
Vision 2020, contagious community.
Right.
Whoops.
Not good. So we had to pull that from our promos. But the idea being, is this an exciting, fun thing that you enjoy, and so would be willing to invite others to come and be a part of it too. And you don't need tons of those. You just need a handful of those things. Yeah. And then others that go deeper, like you said, with Alpha, or maybe a grief support group that you found really meaningful. And you have a neighbor that's going through that too, and they just need a place. And so if you find it meaningful, or if your people find something meaningful, then they're going to be more willing to invite. So that's kind of how we think.
Yeah. And then the next thing I would say is not only having easy things to invite people to, but easy ways your people can do the inviting. Yeah. So I think we talked about this recently, but we do like a Christmas postcard with all of our events on it.
Yep.
And one of the reasons we do that, and we ask our folks, take a few with you and think about people to hand them to and make a personal invite. Because it's so much easier to hand something and be like, hey, come check out our Christmas stuff. Christmas stuff is easy invite. Yeah. And then here's a thing. So it gives me something to talk about. And it's quick, you deliver it, and you're kind of on your way. That's an easy way to invite.
You don't have to remember all the details and try and,
Exactly right. I think, well, if you go to our website,
exactly.
Like, geez, and it helps because people get so anxious when they aren't used to inviting. Yeah. So it's nice to give them something to help them do that. So a postcard, something like that is usually pretty good. Next is encourage your new attenders and or members to invite their friends. Why? It's because your newest people are your most excited.
Yep.
This is where excitement and momentum come in. Excited people bring other excited people. Encourage them right from the bat. Be like, hey, if you seem to be really excited about it here, we love if you'd invite your friends to come and be a part of it. And usually I don't even have to say it. Honestly, they're already inviting their friends.
Yep.
And it's awesome. So try to catch the fire of those new excited attenders and members. Encourage them, invite their friends, and do it very publicly. Another one is challenge your insiders. So people maybe who've been there a minute, challenge your insiders to take a risk in inviting an outsider.
Yeah.
I think our folks need to be challenged directly on that.
Yeah.
Because they won't move on their own.
Yeah.
Because they're so used to not.
Yeah. Well, and I think what happens, and I've seen this multiple times, is that when someone finally does take the step to be an inviter, it reinvigorates them too.
Yeah.
It builds excitement back in, and they go, oh, it was so cool. And they came and they start telling the story of their friends or guests' experience when they came. And so it's actually a way that we can challenge our people to serve others, but also kind of experience some renewed excitement for themselves.
Yeah. This is something I'll usually use as like a sermon application point. That's usually where it fits. And then, of course, at Christmas, when it's an easy invite or a special invite, we'll do a standalone. Hey, folks, there's that family member, there's that friend, there's that coworker, and you've been thinking about inviting them for so long. If you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? Let's do it.
I love it. And then do you guys provide those postcards just in the back and say, hey, take a stack
of them? Yeah, we have stacks of them in the back and say, just take as many as you need.
So take them, give them away. We'd love for you to be inviting, as we're inviting our community. We want you to be inviting your friends and neighbors and invite everybody into the process.
And I always try to help people see, because everyone thinks, what's the worst possible thing that can happen if I invite and then they don't ever talk to me again? But I also want to say, well, what's the best possible thing that can happen?
Yeah.
And I think our folks need that reminder. Okay. And then I just got two more. In your small groups, I think there's opportunity in small groups of course, you could do a small group study that's about inviting, about evangelism. There's one, I know Bill Hybels is not the most popular name anymore, but he did do a curriculum called Just Walk Across the Room. I thought was very good. And there's other curricula out there to do that. That's one way. But also in your small groups, if they're a small group that's pretty comfortable with each other, I'd have them role play it.
Yeah.
Like have them practice inviting somebody or telling their faith story.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's so much value in that. If you ever do the program Rooted, which is something that we are doing now, each person ends up telling their faith story, which is terrifying to them mostly.
Mm-hmm.
I think those things really help. When they practice doing it, then they're less nervous when it comes to inviting others.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you think about how many hours did we spend on sports fields growing up practicing stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And we did that. We practiced preaching in seminary, and we practiced and we practiced and we practiced, and we got better at it over time. And it's the same thing with invitation. It might be terrifying at first, but when you get to do it more, you start to feel more natural, and it comes across as more genuine and authentic. And, it's probably nothing worse than like letting the anxiety build up to the point where when you invite someone, it's like you almost shout at them, that, or like scare them. It's like, no, let's let it be a natural thing that kind of comes out of our genuine excitement.
I really love it. Come to church.
Yeah, come to church. So be careful with that, right? But if there's a place to practice, or just to almost even name the awkwardness of it out loud and chuckle about it and go, you know what, I'm going to try it though. It's worth it. It's worth it. And help people think about that. I think it's a good idea.
I wonder if there would be some, this is just like literally thought about this as we were talking about it, is I wonder if there'd be any value. I wonder if people would roll with the idea of, if you had a pretty good friendship with somebody who doesn't come to church, what if you took the tact, hey, part of what we're doing at church is we're sharing our faith stories. Could I practice on you and tell me what you think? I wonder how that would be received by a friend. I think that'd be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think kind of behind your point too is like there is a fear of losing relationships or something if we're not careful, or we're perceived to be pushy about our faith or something. But I think also the research, people's openness to things of faith is almost like they're kind of waiting for you to say something, maybe, or not surprised. They know you're a Christian and you go to church. And so if you say, hey, you guys should come to the Christmas event, we'd love to have you. And, no agenda behind that other than we enjoy it and we think you guys might too. Like it, you don't have to say, do you know that Jesus loves you, cares about you, has a wonderful plan for your life? And if you died today, where would you go? Like that's not what an invitation is. An invitation is come with me. Let's go and see. Come check it out. We like it. I think you'd like it too. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah. And then lastly, I would just say celebrate at every turn. When you see people inviting, acknowledge it, celebrate it, call it out. The things that get celebrated get repeated.
Yep. That's 1,000% true, Jason. Yeah.
So this builds momentum. When you have a congregation that loves to invite, it builds momentum. And again, the whole idea is, how do we create a flywheel of momentum, consistent enthusiasm over time that draws more and more people into a relationship with Jesus? Because once the momentum gets going, it's like it sort of has a life of its own. It really does.
Perpetuating. I mean, that's what the flywheel is for. That's what momentum helps us do. And so sometimes getting the momentum going is the hard part. To start that win streak when you feel way behind, are we ever going to catch up? 13 games out, there's no way. But then it's one push, and then two, and then you start to see something beginning to happen. And if you can get a handful of inviters being excited and inviting, that's going to have this catalyzing effect, and other people are going to pick up on that and start inviting too. So let's maximize that. Let's go for it and create inviting culture in our communities and see what God does. Trust God with the outcomes, but let's put ourselves in a position to be a part of what He's doing.
Awesome, Jesse. Well, hey, everyone, thanks so much for listening. Next week, we're going to finish our momentum series. We're going to talk about how do you fund it? How do you fund the momentum? Because that's the next question. Okay, great.
Just ruined all of our fun from the last 2 weeks. Now we're going to no, it's so important, right?
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that. And it's such an important part of it, and something that like we're nonprofit organizations. We got to figure out, how are we going to build a scaffolding around the momentum that's
And there's some
Exactly.
really key things that we're going to get into that are helpful toward that, and in our lived experience of how that's gone well, and sometimes maybe when we didn't quite get it right. So really worth coming back and listening in for that conversation, because momentum is awesome. But if we want to sustain it and see some sustained growth because of it, we're going to have to resource it and figure out how to fund it. So looking forward to that conversation too.
Well, thanks so much, everyone, for being with us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, by the way, we're on YouTube now, and we got a new look here.
Yeah,
So
I combed my hair today.
we
I
got
put
our
on,
same boxes, but we're in a new container, which is pretty fancy. So let us know what you think. Anyway, thanks so much. Ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together.